And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. And today I am joined by Ross of D20 Studios for an interview that went completely on time and in no way got messed up due to some sort of computer error, whatever you might be thinking. That's just absurd. So, yes, we'll start with some introductions as to who you are.
Sure, my name is Ross Shabilsky. I am the founder of D20 Studios. We are an indie game company based in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, and when did you discover video games?
Discovered video games as early as I can remember. I mean, I think I grew up playing on the old Intellivision, so that's given an idea of. And then after that, the original NES. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Okay, and what would you say is your favorite game or games growing up?
Game or games? Specifically video games or just any kind of game?
Just any type of game, video games or otherwise.
Any types of games. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll start with video games. I was a huge fan of the original Dark Sun series on the 486. It was like a D&D game. I liked StarCraft, Warcraft, huge fans of those. And let's see what other games. Legend of Zelda, like original games growing up, I suppose, as we could coverage. And then tabletop games growing up, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, miniature-based games like Warhammer and Hero Quest.
Okay, and what would you say is your favorite game or games now?
My favorite games now, I would have to say I like things I can play with my son. So we are both really into playing this game, Night Squad. It's like a Xbox One party style game where we just go in there and play a bunch of games slaughtering each other. It's a ton of fun. Recently played Terraria with him, had a lot of fun with that. I'd say that was pretty good. And still like the classic like RTS games. I like StarCraft a lot still. And also FPS games, Halo, probably one of my favorite games.
Okay, so now we can get into the meat and taters of this interview. So, like, if we were at PAX like I was a few months ago, and a person just walked upon your booth. Like, what would be the rundown you'd give them as to what Summoner's Fate is?
Oh, sure. Well, the first thing I would ask is, hey, you, do you want to throw a squirrel at some orcs? And that usually gets people's attention. And I'd say, yeah, Summoner's Fate. It's a turn-based strategy game combined with a deck builder that's about winning in the most weird and creative ways possible. So we ask, if you could throw a squirrel at your enemies, would you choose to blow up the squirrel, destroying all your enemies and the squirrel itself? Or would you choose to mutate that squirrel into an incredible Hulk squirrel and then breed an army of mutant Hulk squirrels to overrun your foes? And those are just a couple of weird possibilities you can do. The game's all about exploring, adventuring, collecting new cards and characters, and building a deck suited to your own personalized strategy, and having a lot of fun doing so.
Okay, so to go into a bit more detail as to like how exactly the game will play if someone just had it in front of them and was about to give it a whirl.
Sure. So it's played from a top-down perspective. So if you can imagine like a 2D grid-based tactical combat, like if you're playing the classic Dungeons and Dragons and moving your miniatures on the board, it looks like that from a god's eye view. And the characters on the board look up to you literally. They look up at the sky for you to command them like a god. And you take turns. So you get to move each of your characters and perform an attack in sort of a seamless gesture. So Everybody looks up, you pick a character, drag them to where you want to go and who you want to attack. They follow your orders. And in addition, you also you have a hand of 3 cards, and those will be drawn from your deck of spells that you created. And the cards represent magical spells like fireballs, or summoning creatures, or new equipment you can place in your characters. And you get 3 mana per turn. It goes up to 5, and so the cards range between 0 and 5 mana. And the cards are played relative to your summoner caster. So one of your heroes on the board is your summoner, and they represent the person that can cast all the spells. And then you've also got supporting characters on your team as well. And that way it takes into account things like line of sight. So the environment can have an impact. If there's trees blocking your way, or pits or chasms, those can all play an effect into the game. A lot of cards will transform the environment. So you can transform trees into big tree monsters, or use gravity spells to push characters into spike blocks or spike pit traps, things like that. And it goes back and forth. So you complete your turn moving your guys, and the enemy, whether that's an AI player or another human opponent, will then take their turn. And typically the goal in like a battle is to defeat the enemy summoner. So if you kill the enemy summoner, that person loses. If your summoner dies, you lose the battle. And in the single player, you're also going along, completing various challenges and exploring as well. So some of the single player levels aren't necessarily going to be combat. They might be like an encounter situation, a puzzle, something you might have to make a choice about. It might be gaining a new character to follow you, or collecting new cards or spells, being able to edit your deck, things like that.
Okay. So what made you decide to make Summoner's Fate a deck builder style game?
So I guess growing up playing our favorite like classic tabletop games like D&D, Magic, things like that, the core thing that stuck out to us when we were talking about how to make this game was that what's the core element of those games that makes them really fun and exciting. And it came down to like what I feel it is the ability to creatively express yourself. So the games were fun because you got to think outside the box and win in really weird and creative ways, to like really create a personalized character that did things a certain way. And so with the deck building element, it allows us to create that diversity of player choice with little bite-sized pieces that are easy to consume and understand the rules with. So when you start like the game, for instance, you have just you don't actually, in the current story, you don't start with any of the cards, and you go along the journey, you start collecting them as you go and making choices. The choices you make and which cards you pick determine what kind of a strategy you're going to play as. So kind of like I said earlier on, you could choose to be the druid that throws squirrels and wants to just make a bunch of suicide bomber squirrels. Or if you choose different cards, maybe you're the one that's bringing the army of those squirrels. Or maybe you're the person who wants to be like the necromancer and summon hordes of undead, or a vampire and suck everyone's life force out to become immortal. The deck building aspect of it gives you the choices to do that as you play. So you can kind of take shape and adapt to the various situations you're coming across, and be creative about how you choose to overcome those obstacles.
Okay. And so it says on the website, on the Summoner's Fate portion of your studio's website, that the game has a fair bit of procedural generation in it. So is the procedural generation, is that tie into what you said about the deck building game, about giving players a choice as to how they proceed with each encounter? Or did you find procedural generation was just like the easiest thing to do with what you wanted to do?
So the reason for the procedural generation is that we want to create new experiences each time someone plays. So part of the fun of the adventure is this discovery aspect. Like, you don't know what's going to come around the corner. And we wanted the game to be infinitely replayable. And we do that by both supporting continuous content, so we're constantly adding new content to the game. In fact, I do a weekly dev stream. We've been putting new cards and various content into the game each week with that. And then the procedural part of it helps to formulate that in new and interesting ways. So even if you played through an adventure once, when you start a new world, it creates a whole different configuration and presents different types of challenges in different orders that changes the way the adventure plays out. So you feel like you're getting a unique experience each time, and you don't know what's going to happen in each of the rooms or areas you're going to explore next. And that creates a lot of excitement because you don't know if the next room is going to have like a treasure in it necessarily, or it's going to have a giant monster, or you're going to encounter something that you haven't seen before. And that creates this really fun sense of excitement. And with the new content being added with it, it sort of also creates opportunities where the procedural parts can mix in with the new content to combine things in interesting ways. So not only are you seeing new challenges, but based on the type of cards you get, which is also part of that procedural algorithm, you'll be able to find new ways to build your strategy and new synergies you might not have had before the first time you played through it. So that's kind of the main reason. It's just lots of newness and excitement.
Okay. And you mentioned before, you mentioned a bit earlier about how certain tabletop games gave you were some of the inspiration behind this game. But was there anything else you say just really clicked something in your brain and
So it's actually, this is the spiritual successor to our first game we created, which was called Hero Mages. And that game itself was a digitalized version of a board game I created. So this has actually been, I guess, like if you consider like the succession of these different things, probably like a 12, 15-year journey at this point. I'm not sure how many years it is when I started the original board game design. But we used to get together and have weekly game nights with my friends, and we play a lot of video games, a lot of tabletop games, and we had a lot of disputes, I'll put it that way, about the rules. Some of the rules of these games are very complex. I know we argue a lot about line of sight and whether you could see people or not, because it would make a big difference in who would win. And they would also take a lot of time, was the other kind of big issue. So it became harder and harder to get together and play these 4-hour campaigns. So we wanted a way to get together and play something that was quick. So the initial goal was to design this board game that would sort of combine different games together, let you play it in like 15-minute sessions so you could do lots of battles really fast. And then eventually my buddy suggested, you should take this and bring it to digital, because then we could play it when we can't get together and stuff. And then Summoner's Fate was about taking that even further to the next level. What happens when we can't get together and we can't sync up at the same time? So we wanted to create something where you could play against the AI in the single player, and also play against your friends, but in sort of like this asynchronous and desynchronous modes, where you can either play turn over turn, like a Words with Friends style, or the desynchronous mode lets you build different decks and stuff like that, and then you can play against your friends' decks. But the AI controls it, so you don't even have to be connected. You can sort of get the feeling of playing your friends' creations even when you can't sync up or have time to do a back and forth game. So those are kind of the main motivations. I wanted to just sort of take that idea of having that fun, awesome experience and making it more and more accessible to meet the needs of gamers today.
Okay. So, as someone who knows exactly nothing about all of the inner workings as to what goes into actually making a game, from the very beginnings of an idea to the finished product that's going to be put out to the world, how long will the grand total of time have been to make Summoner's Fate?
Well, we are just over 3 years now, full-time, building Summoner's Fate from the ground up. And Anticipated worldwide launch sometime in Q1, Q2 next year. So it will have been in total about 4 years to get to the full release. So that's quite a long time. But beyond that, my goal is I designed the game with the idea we would continue to service and expand it going into the future. So like I want to have this game running for the next several decades, creating updates and new content, because it's kind of like it's one of those games where it's, you know, card based in nature. There's lots of room to expand, and it's almost like a hobby, really, more so than a game, and something that we can expand on as a platform to create new game modes and stuff like that. So I see it having a really long development cycle, even beyond the initial worldwide launch coming up next year.
Okay, and so what platforms do you anticipate releasing it on once it's all ship-shape and ready to go?
So we will be launching. Actually, so I should probably call this out. We are actually released now in pre-release, so it's not official worldwide yet, but the game is available on our website. And the target platforms are PC, Mac, Android, and iOS. And we support both tablets, full screen TVs, projectors, and phones, both landscape and portrait orientation. So it's widely supported on a number of devices. You can play it in 4K on your top-end PC monitor, and you can play it one hand while you're waiting in line for a Starbucks.
Okay. And it brings us to the final question, which everyone who's ever been on my show has always perfectly understood, and there's never been any confusion ever, and if you disagree, you're a liar. Ross, in your opinion, is video games?
Is video games? Yes.
Okay. And with that incredibly clear and concise answer, that brings us to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Ross of D20 Studios for joining me for a recording that is in no way impeded by technical issues of any kind. And yes, if any of the -7 of you are suddenly interested in this, you can go to D20. The one time the computer doesn't work. You can go to d20studios.com and you can get a more detailed rundown as to Summoner's Fate. If for some reason you liked this show that you're currently listening to, you can like and subscribe and follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83, and I believe you can follow D20 Studios on the Twitters at D20 Studio. And yes, be sure to keep Summoner's Fate on your radars for the next while. And yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, and as I always say at the end of an episode, whether I want to or not, have a gourd day, everyone.
Awesome.